we go.
It'll work eventually.
I know. And I'm like, okay, here we are. All right. So welcome everybody to another day of Mindsetaholics podcast, because Mel and I are working through all the, I don't know, the beginnings of podcast frustration. Shall we call it like mindset of podcast? That word?
Wow. I can't talk today. Let me start over and try again. So tech has a mind of its own. I think you and I have talked about this. When I was in high school, my tech teacher had a poster that I have searched for my entire life and I cannot find it. It's a poster of a chicken who clearly has thrown every computer and every printer all over the room. So the room is a disaster. And you can just see on the chicken's face how distraught the chicken is, with a lovely little bubble above its head that says, "I need a computer that can read my lips." And then there's this lovely little thought bubble below the chicken that says, "But then I would need lips." And even as far as technology has come, we're still in that chicken phase.
Oh dear. Oh dear, 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 dear. Okay, that brings up a lot of memes and a lot of fun stuff that we could really get into today. I think we talked about the topic today in Mindsetaholics on sort of this changing behavior on buying, really. And the reason I say on buying really is honestly, all this information, 85% of the information is fabulous. And people talk about, well, be a thought leader, move your business forward, be a thought leader. And yeah, you need thought leadership, you need information. But as you and I have discussed a little bit, there's this whole concept of organizations are trying to get the word out. Oh my gosh, my video just decided to go on a disco ball. Anyways, at the end of the day,
Prime reference to the chicken.
We'll put a chicken up. Anyways, at the end of the day, buyers are struggling with even making a decision. So I was at a conference that talked about look at your Amazon cart. We'll use this as the analogy. Look at your Amazon cart, and you probably have 300 items, and some of them have been there for 2 or 3 years. Okay. So to elaborate this point, what happens with information is we go in and we see whatever it is we're going to buy, and we would make a decision immediately. But Amazon does this really great thing, and it shows you these reviews, right? Here's the Amazon reviews. Here we go. And you see that it has 5,000 5-star likes and 2 negative reviews. So you're at 4.99 point whatever, you're right.
997.
And then the human goes, well, maybe I should, here's all these great reviews. Oh, let me look at this one bad review. And the one bad review says they were late on shipping.
Yeah, which has absolutely nothing to do with the product.
It has nothing to do with the product. But now Amazon does this thing, and it shows you all the competitors' products. Of course, if you've paid the ads, right? If you've paid for the ad, we've talked about this. This is rotating through. Amazon shows you 5,000 of the products, and some have 4.55 stars and 3.75 stars. And of course, these are only being shown because, like I said, you paid for the ads, right? Yep. So if you're the product that is down at the bottom of the barrel, you'll never even see it as this thing. So now you as a consumer have a decision, and you are in hell, and you start going, I'm going to go down this big rabbit hole of hell.
Which
And
I openly admit I am super guilty of. When I'm researching something, I will get lost in the rabbit hole hell of Amazon.
okay, all right.
I did
So
it the one night for baby wipes of all things, and
and
I can tell you more about them than the average person can.
it's like 2 cents difference in price, right? Because they're
Yep.
all watching the price anyway. So, anyways, so then what do you do? You spend about 35 minutes and then maybe an hour, and then you get frustrated and you throw it in your cart and you say, I'll deal with it later,
Yep.
right? Now go into the B2B space and the information age and the digital noise. This is what really, really, really is the problem. And now we have AI on top of it, right? So
Mhm.
now it is, well, what AI agent should we do? I mean, you and I have talked about email hell. Like everybody's going into this. Go in and do email because we have a new AI agent.
Ooh, want a cookie?
Want a cookie? Or 12 or 500. Yes, I do want a cookie. So, anyways, and
Prefer peanut butter or chocolate chip or oatmeal?
I I've got a children's book on that. And it talks about this. But anyways, as you go into this, we are thought leadering, informationing,
Mhm.
telling everybody. You cannot get an answer for anything. We are back to the Fuller Brushman era where you are going to have to go door to door to prove that you're human, to prove that you're this, to prove that you've got an opinion
Yep.
and that it's real and it wasn't staged. No offense to marketing and to advertising.
No offense at all. I totally get it. And I half the time initiate these conversations with you because I'm like, this annoys me.
So now we're
Yep.
in the era of now creating buyer confidence in their decision against 5 to 11 decision makers. So how do
Well,
we do that as
can we let's step back
businesses?
for a moment and let me have my rant on thought leadership.
Okay. First of all, I know it messed its pants, but keep going. Let's go. There's your baby wipe.
So, thought leadership is such an overused term, and it is always okay. I won't say always, but I will say 99 point, what did we agree on? 97% of the time misused.
Oh, at least.
And if you are what started as you have a different approach, you have a different thought process, you have something different than what is currently available in the market, has turned into you are now a thought leader if you post 20 times a day and you have all of these ads running and you have all of these stupid kitschy products. Now that is what thought leadership is. So, first of all, debunking that and calling attention to thought leadership is more aligned with a scam than it is true thought leadership.
Yeah.
And then you factor in, okay, so we have this element, and then we move over and it becomes how do we build confidence and trust in the sales process when there are so many thought leaders out there with credible information? And it's like, okay, well, that's a whole other element. A lot of content is copy pasted, thrown into AI, and anything you put into AI, that AI gives you, hint, AI is giving to your competitor as well, which means it's not thought leadership, it's copycat leadership.
Oh, I like that. Copycat leadership. So what you're saying is in all reality, we don't even know what the definition of leadership is to begin with, or expertise, or expert, or any of the other terms that we're talking
Agreed. And all of these terms are terms that if and when you use them to describe yourself, it's just ego. You're a self-proclaimed prophet, if you will. It's These are all terms that somebody else should be using to describe you, because that's when it becomes a reality. If I walk around going, I'm an expert, that actually says you're an amateur, because a real expert doesn't need to say that.
Okay, so in the B2B buying and selling space, the challenge too, though, is people buy for their reasons. They buy
Yep.
your product to help solve a need and a challenge. They hate the word sales because sales is a 4-letter word. Somehow sales became the 4-letter word. And in the end of everything,
Mhm.
we can't have thought leaders. You're actually counterintuitive when you say you are an expert, because you're really not an expert because you're amateur land. And so, how do we make a decision?
That's a great question. And this is what companies, especially in B2B, struggle with all the time. If you're seeing comparable, credible articles and research resources that the competitors you are assessing all say the same thing or similar with minor brand modifications, how do you know who you can trust? Then it goes back to more of the old school ways, like you were saying. Are we going to go door to door to prove you're human? Are we going to take people out to lunch to prove you're human? That's where the relationship comes into play again. And it's a matter of what is the true pain point. If you can't get clarity on what the true pain point is, you can't uh, you can't create a framework to help them make an informed decision.
So, there is the crux. That's kind of what they were saying. If you can't get clarity on what the problem is. Now, in B2B, we've known for a long time that there are, you know, 5 to 12, maybe 15 decision makers, depending on how big the
Yeah.
sale is, right?
Yep.
It could be it could be as little as a mom and a pop organization, but mom and pop are making a decision and they don't fundamentally always agree on what the problem is, right? And at the end of the day, everybody's saying cut costs, but how do you even say cut costs? You're buying something to help you cut costs, right? So it's like, and then to say, okay, there's 12 of them with all their various personalities, all their various different ways that they buy, all of those things, and they can't agree on the problem.
Mhm.
And I think that's an uphill battle for marketing, honestly. It used to be, okay, rewind 2012, everybody do account based marketing, throw content regurgitation everywhere, do all of these issues. It's going to create demand.
Yep.
And the problem is now there is so much that it's actually stalling demand.
Yep.
So now we just say the downfall, not just of the digital era, but the downfall of digital marketers, because that was their bread and butter. How do we fix that?
So this goes back to a conversation you and I have had multiple times. And what's interesting is the general expectation for most companies is that marketing is an expense. And as long as that mindset remains, companies will have the expectation that marketing will deliver as an expense would deliver, meaning I pay $1, I get $1's worth of work. And that's not true anymore. So much of marketing is more like a crock pot where you have the crock pot, you put all the ingredients in, but you still have nothing.
Yeah.
And if you don't turn it on, you're not going to get anything. And then add into that, even though you've put the ingredients in, you've turned it on, you're not going to get anything for in a crock pot situation, it's 4 to 8 hours depending on what you're making. And a lot of marketing works that way. Pre-social media, it was 8 to 15 touch points to close a sale for someone who has never heard of your brand. That's pre-social media. We've talked about this. It's anywhere from 30 to 80,000 touch points at this present moment, depending on the industry, depending on what you're selling. And it's
Well,
like,
because, yeah.
everything's changing. We're constantly inundated. Our phones are dinging, our computers are binging, and we're constantly inundated with messages and ads and helpful information and podcasts and news articles. And it's how do we accomplish those metrics of 30 to 80,000 touch points, do it in a way that is inviting, shows and proves that we're human, leverages AI in a way that doesn't make it cumbersome, but yet also doesn't sterilize it either. And what's going to work for one company is not necessarily going to work for another company.
Yeah. And yet you hear people say, give me a ballpark quote. What, on the moving target? How do you ballpark quote,
On a
for,
moving target while you're standing on or sitting in a kayak.
I
So
think
you're
we
constantly
need,
moving too.
I think we need like the cat in the hat, like a bouncing cat in the hat showing up on this. And so we probably will have one on the re-edits of all of this. But the reality is, that's, I don't think so. The situation in the mindset has been there since, I always say, sin is as old as Adam and Eve. So don't, I get it. The different flavors, whatever, same thing recirculates. And the other thing, pre-COVID, retail was already struggling with storefronts because of Amazon, and it's easier, it's at your fingertips. But now we're seeing carts full of stuff that's not being bought,
Yep.
right? In this. And we know that women and men and any flavor in between, I'm not going to get into that, but let's just say women and men for this one. Women typically, not always, but typically, they are experiential shoppers. They see things, they want to try it on, they want to go in and they want to touch it and feel it. Men can look at it, I just want this, I'll buy it, right? And
Yes.
I'd love to see a statistic where, those that are really midnight shopping on the shopping channel, right? But at
Yep.
the end of the day, um, we're a little more experiential in that
Mhm.
kind of sense. And so it was okay, well, grocery stores would be no longer, everything would be no longer. Now we got drones, they'll bring you your groceries, they'll do all of those things. You had Amazon saying in the book, the four, he was quoted as saying that he would put out of business everybody and it
Mhm.
would become all machines, and drones and all of these things. Now we have so much information, and I don't care if it's we become Blade Runner or whatever, we have so much information running around that, especially generationally, who are used to being able to see all this information, I don't know how they ever make a decision. That's one of the challenges. They never kind of had that shift before. They're being born into this. But also the whole idea that, okay, now I want to go into a grocery store because I want to smell the lemons. I want to make sure the produce is how I want it. This whole process. But now imagine that, even without Amazon, imagine that, and you're setting up a business. We talked about this with cyber risk. We've talked about this with you're setting up a business and your expenditure of a physical location is somehow missed. It's not on your budget, it's not on your business plan.
Yep.
You're just somehow magically you're missing that capital equipment, whatever that is, right? You're building your rent, whatever that is, right? That's how I see a lot of times when either they look at digital assets or they look at marketing or in general, right? Is today we all have to have a website. Why? Because it's just part of it. I don't care.
Yeah.
People go first, they research a website, then they go to the next place. You don't have that presence. You could have it on LinkedIn. That could be your website. But I mean, you don't have some kind of digital storefront, website, whatever. People are not going to go. So, why at some point
It's the
there
only
is,
presence for you to own your digital presence. If you
yeah,
use a tool, LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever platform you choose, you don't own that. I mean, you
that's
might
true.
own what you upload, but you don't have the ability to control when, where, why, or how your content is shown. Just creating a business page on LinkedIn, great, fabulous. Will it help you? Yes, but will it boost you above anybody else? No, not unless you're paying LinkedIn and continuing to pay LinkedIn. And then, by the way, even after you look at the company page, they're still going to want to go to your site to learn more about you. They're simply using, in this case, LinkedIn
Yeah,
to validate that you are a legit business.
that you're a legit business. So
Yep.
rewind to 1990s,
Yep.
a website would have been out of the realm of thinking and would
Yep.
not have been tangible. Today, it is a tangible, physical, in their
Yep.
mind, a physical product because you can conjure it, right?
Yep.
But the
In the
whole point of
90s, it was
you,
you went to the Better Business Bureau to validate that it was a legit business. Then it
exactly.
became you went to Facebook to validate, and Facebook essentially put the Better Business Bureau out of business. They're still around, but they don't have any level of the credibility they did prior. And now it seems that it has shifted yet again, where B2C goes to Facebook to validate, B2B goes to LinkedIn to validate. Once they get there, then they still go to your website to validate that you are a legit business.
Okay. So a website is a marketing asset. It's
Yep.
your storefront. It
Yep.
is the physical thing that should have been on the line item. Now, I'm not in marketing's camp. I'm not in sales camp. I'm not in any
Yep.
specific camp. At the end of the day, if we are in an era of not even being able to identify on the problem, like get consensus on the problem,
Yep.
how do you know which expenses to cut, or how do you know which vendors to go with? How do you know? It has become a problem. I don't have a complete answer. I do know one thing is I feel like we're back with Zig Ziglar era and we're back with Fuller Brush, right?
Hmm.
It has to be, it's almost like I have to shout that I'm a human in order to then create that credibility, because we've always, well, we haven't always. We can have family dysfunction, but let's just say that your parent, whichever one was pivotal in your life, and that parent could have been an adopted parent, it could have been whatever that is. I'm not talking about like your biological parent, but for some dumb reason, if they say something
Hmm.
because it was so, you immediately trust it somehow.
It's the authority voice.
Yeah.
Just like even in business, even in networking, even with clients, there are certain people that I know, if you say something, I essentially drop everything and I go look it up. And that's how that works. There's a handful of people that I just don't question. Back in the day, that's how I switched over to Zoom. I was one of the first people to try Zoom when they first launched, and I'm like, well, this is cool. It's way too buggy. And so you go to meeting at the time, and then I had a client who was one of those people. You never ask, you just do because she's super cool and you adore her so much. She goes, I'm sending you a link, click on it, and we're testing this. And I'm like, okay. So she sends me a Zoom link, we jump on, and I'm like, oh my God, they've come so far. That day, canceled GoToMeeting, signed up for Zoom,
Yeah.
skipped the free trial, done. And there's just certain people that have that level of authority, have that level of credibility. And I, in my situation, I like to think that they have earned that position, and they've proven over time that they do have a good ability to assess different situations, different people, different technology, and it just makes it easier, so I don't have to do all of the vetting work of every aspect of the person, the business, the product, because somebody else who I know I can trust their voice has done at least some of that on for me.
All right. I think you've hit the crux of what this conference was about. It was coming full circle to the end of this podcast. Coming full circle, the reality is we're going to have to get better on increasing a buyer's confidence in making a decision.
Yep.
And that was my aha moment. I wish I could. There's actually a study around it, and we can cite the book and the author of what this was at the conference, but in the show notes. But the reality is, buyers do not have confidence to make a decision in the B2B space for whatever reason. Whether it's I don't want to be the fall guy, whether it's
Yep.
I'm the Amazon, I threw it in the cart, whether it is the fact that we as a disservice started adding content after content after content after content. I and then the shiny object of AI and AI agents, that your life's going to be easier. I mean, it started maybe before the microwave where we got instant gratification and we didn't do due diligence. Maybe it's a US thing where we want to run so fast that we
Yeah.
need all the tools to help us run that fast.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's prophetically Moore's law, and I'm not talking about yes, get in the smaller thing, but kind of that whole
Yeah.
concept. I don't really know, Mel, but at the end of the day, our minds are going to have to shift with this.
They are. And it's I don't
And
think it's any one of those things. It's a combination thereof. The majority of B2B decision making is done by committee. So you have a combination of people that you trust,
mhm,
people that you know, but you don't know whether you can trust them, but you do because you're part of the same company. And they're each going to have different needs. They're going to have each have different wants. And even if it's not somebody you know or trust, if they see something wrong with whatever the solution is, you're going to take that into account because they're on the same team that has to come to a consensus decision.
yeah. Well, I don't know that I solved anything, but we did bring up a lot of questions for the problem.
We are really good at that.
If anybody hasn't done this, go look up the State Farm ad called the French model. And that's where we have now come back full circle to. and,
We
I,
have indeed.
and uh, I am now at a point where I'm like, hmm. And I would dare say that businesses, unless you are willing to navigate that journey, um, yeah, it's hard. It's going to be tough.
It is. And this is where I know one thing that I do for any of my clients is, and prospects, I will openly tell them, if you're hiring within my space and I'm not the right fit for you, great. I am more than happy to help you make the right decision for you. I will review anybody you want me to review. I'll sit in on interviews with you and help you make that right decision.
Yeah.
And that way you have that professional level perspective that can explain things that maybe you've heard of, but you don't necessarily know what it means, how it's relevant to your business, or how it's relevant to you.
Yeah, it's a business information audit, basically. I mean, a business systems audit,
Yeah.
and I think that that's kind of the crux too of um, way back. And I'm a big challenger sale
Yeah.
study. It's not a methodology. People always think it is, but it was just a study. And the reality is that's kind of where it's at. If you aren't willing to walk away
Hmm.
from the process, I would say at the end of this, the best thing is to do the Mel doula. Now Mel is the doula, right? Do the do the
You're adding a
Valerie
level of
doula.
expertise I didn't know I had.
Well, it really is because I mean, if you think about that, a doula to help
Yeah.
emotionally get women through having a baby, right? You've never
Doulas
had
are
that.
amazing. I highly recommend them, by the way.
Yeah. And my daughter's one. That's why I brought it up. I'm like, a doula is a thing? And then I
Oh,
was
yeah.
like, oh yeah, it's a thing. But back when I was having babies, doulas have been around forever, but I had no idea about such thing.
Yep.
And it's like, gosh, wouldn't you want to pay a few dollars to at least get the expertise
Yep.
on at least making the decisions like that guide, even if it cost you, let's say it cost you $1,000,
Hmm.
but it saved you several years in revenue of pain from that
Yep.
expertise, right? Even if that is just, I don't know, maybe it'll be the rise of consensus doulas, right?
Ooh.
I just coined a new phrase, consensus
We are just
doulas.
totally inventing new industries at this point.
Anyways, it's been a fabulous conversation today. I'm excited to see some shorts come from this.
Oh, I can only imagine what's going to come out of this one. We're going to have chickens and we've got bouncing Dr. Seuss.
All right. Well, as we always say, like us, love us, comment. Uh, if you want to be on the show, if you want to be on a clean psychedelic mind trip, come and join Mel and I on this journey that we have somehow started and don't know where it will end.
Or what path we're going to go. This feels like we need a Dr. Seuss quote to reference the ebbs and flows. It'll come to me later. Maybe we'll start next show with that.
Yes, I think we have a new show on that one, the Dr. Seuss ebb and flow on the Mindsetaholics psychedelic doula trip. All right, this is Mel Asher. Mel, this
That
is
would be
Valerie
me. She's
Cobb.
Valerie Cobb. She seems to be
Yeah,
confused about who we are today.
and we'll see you next time.